Hi, welcome to the Mental Wellness Journey. Today's guest, we're very privileged to have, is Dr. Shelly Sethi, and she's board certified family physician, and she has an emphasis in integrative and functional medicine. And she believes that health is a journey and manifests through a balance of nutrition, environment, community, spirituality, and physical movement. So welcome. Thank you so much for your generosity with your time. And I'm very pleased to have met you. Let me ask you a little bit about, I'm going to say, I find it always interesting with traditionally trained medical doctors that do residency, how they find their ways to integrative medicine, because we're not taught that so much in medical school. So how did you make your way there?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Goldman, for having me on your show, on your summit. This is really an honor. So I really began my journey when I was much younger. I was in junior high and was exposed to meditation at that time. And through that, I really began to understand the connection between the mind and body and the effects that those sorts of practices would have on our health. So fast forward to college, I actually had no intention of going to medical school. I enjoy getting into discussions and arguments, I guess would be a good word, with my family members and friends, and so thought that I was going to go to law school.
Oh.
But I realized after I'd gotten a call from my sister, which informed me that my father was very ill, that perhaps, going into the healing arts was something that I wanted to pursue. And so, he had been diagnosed at that moment with chest pain that was related to his cardiovascular health, and they were doing emergency surgery on him the next morning, where they were going to do that bypass surgery that involves cracking open your chest and going in there and rerouting the vessels so that oxygen flow can get to the heart. So that was kind of a wake-up moment for me. I happened to be reading at the time Dr. Deepak Chopra's book, and as well as Dr. Andrew Weil's book, which I believe was Optimal Healing for Optimal Foods for Optimal Health. And really thought to myself, well, how can we prevent ourselves from getting into this situation? How did my dad get here? How did he end up on this operating table? Honestly, we didn't have a clue that he even had any of these underlying issues going on. And so I decided I wanted to go into healing. And of course, at the time, the options, my ethnicity is Indian. So for us, the choices were being an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer, and so it made sense that I was going to choose going to medical school. And of course, I ended up choosing osteopathic school because I felt at the time that perhaps it would be kind of a mediary between allopathic or, the MD schools and naturopathic medicine, the ND schools. So that's how I sort of ended up within medicine. And then after a time, I realized that while there was a lot of talk about the connection between the body and of course, the different things that we can do from a lifestyle perspective, that there was very little teaching on nutrition and mind-body practices and sleep, and that these things actually do probably have a bigger effect on our health than, the medications that we take and the pharmaceutical things that we do. So at that point, I decided to pursue a fellowship in integrative medicine taught by my inspirational mentor, Dr. Andrew Weil, and went to Arizona, did a 2-year fellowship there and board certification there. And now I get the privilege actually of training and being involved in the fellowship, training of other physicians and clinicians in the fellowship. So it's been a really nice journey to have, come back around and be able to now bring this to my fellow clinicians as well.
Yeah, no, I think that is amazing, because we were talking a few days ago, and yeah, being in psychiatry everything was about the brain, the brain, the brain, the brain. And was it attached to the rest of the body? I'm not so sure. and a lot of my clients too, it's hard for me to meditate, and it's difficult. And so that's why it's fascinating to speak with you about it and how to bring that to people, and make it more accessible, because it is so profound. How do you bring that with your clients, with your patients?
Right. Well, I think it can start by addressing some of the what I'm going to call myths around meditation, right? So
Okay.
most times when people come in, and at this point in my practice, it's a bit of a non-negotiable. I really do ask all of my patients to engage in either a breathwork practice or a meditation practice, or if they have another mind, body, spiritual practice that they're engaged in, that's great. But they oftentimes will resist, and they'll say, oh, I've tried meditation and it doesn't work for me. I can't stop my mind from thinking, or I just, I'm not good at it, or it's not for me. I can't sit in one place. I'm always moving. So, and sometimes even the objections are, that's a religious practice and it doesn't really fit with my practice of spirituality or my practice of religion. And so they seem to have a sort of understanding that it is associated with some type of religion, right? So I think, by first addressing those, and so for one, I tell my patients and my clients that, there's nothing really magical about this practice. While it was perhaps associated, I think, in a spiritual realm or from the spiritual perspective, that this really is a practice of focused awareness. And if we really look at the origins of meditation and breathwork, it was really about, humans that were likely sitting around studying their body and their brains, and understanding how they could, begin to train their brains to have that quiet and that stillness that allows them to have awareness, without the constant distraction of the thoughts. And over time, with practice, I think there was this understanding that through practice, you can get yourself into deeper and deeper states of being able to, I'm going to say, not quiet the mind, but distract your focus away from your thoughts. So I don't really.
Can you say that line again? Because I think I really like the way you said that.
Absolutely. So it's not about the distraction of the thoughts, but really it's about where you put your focus. And so by not focusing on your thoughts, that is indeed the practice of meditation. And so let's just simplify this. This isn't some difficult technique that is requiring you to stop your thoughts. In fact, your brain is going to generate thoughts. That's its job. And that's a good thing. Right. However, where you put your focus is your choice. You have control and power over that. So your thoughts can go on and on and on. You can choose to attend to them, or you can choose to focus on your breath, or on a word, or on a vision, or whatever your choice is. And it is in that practice where you keep bringing your attention back to that one thing and away from your thoughts. That is the practice of meditation. That is the development of the brain structure. And we can now measure these things by using radiology and technology, and look at how those just the practice of bringing the attention back to the breath and back to the breath and back to the breath literally changes the physiology of the brain, right? We see that there are changes in the structure. We see that there are changes in the chemical release of hormones and neurotransmitters in the brain. We see that a whole host of really beneficial things begin to happen in the body just by doing that practice. So, the first thing I say is there's no bad meditation, right? It's just a practice.
Thank you. Yes. You can't do it wrong.
You can't do it wrong. It's all about practice. And I've been doing this long enough, since the age of 13, that I've delved into varieties of practices. I've done many, many different types of meditative practices, breath work. I've met many, many different mentors and teachers through my journey. And even the most advanced meditators will tell you there are days when within a minute span, they have had 2,000 thoughts, you know, and they're aware of it. And it is just that recognition that, oh, shoot, my mind went down this. I'm already like thinking about, I have to pick my kid up from school and, oh, right. Okay. Back to the breath. Right. Inhale and exhale, inhale and exhale. And that's okay. And then there are going to be days when you realize that 5 minutes have gone by and you've had very little distraction by your thoughts. Doesn't mean that thoughts aren't there, but your attention hasn't been on them.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's pretty, again, that's why I love that you are participating, because I think people need to hear that again and again. And that is such a tricky thing to get or to understand and to begin to practice it. So tell me a little bit about your practice, because that's what's really fascinating to me too, sort of how you evolved. You have all these pieces, but then you go this traditional, semi-traditional route, but you were more enlightened than the majority of medical students, I think. And so how does that play out in your practice? So it's non-negotiable about some sort of meditative practice.
Yeah, so generally my practice, I would describe it as a personalized practice that brings in, aspects of integrative medicine, conventional medicine, and functional medicine. And so when patients come to me, we spend a lot of time focusing on an understanding of root cause of their disease process. So while in conventional medicine, I was trained to make a diagnosis and focus on the diagnosis for treatment options, which typically would involve some type of, pharmaceutical intervention. Through the practice of integrative medicine, my focus is less on the diagnosis and more on, when did you last feel well? When did you start not feeling well? And can we really approach this as, if we think about a tree, there might be different branches, and those branches could be the diagnoses that you've been given. But really, when we move down to the roots, if we can strengthen the roots and make sure they're getting the nutrition that they need and the water that they need and the rest that they need and all the components that they need, then, and, keeping the microbiome, the biome of the, ecosystem healthy around it, then we know that the tree is going to be stronger. We know that those branches are going to be healthy, right? So it's not so important necessarily what we've been giving people in terms of a conventional diagnosis, but really more important to go backwards, because I think oftentimes we see that, sometimes it's the same root cause that's manifesting in specific symptoms in a patient, which using conventional medicine, we give somebody the diagnosis of maybe anxiety and irritable bowel syndrome, right? And those are two separate diagnoses.
Right.
But really, if we go backwards and we go further upstream, we might find out that, the gut is not very healthy. There's inflammation there and the microbiome is not well. And the fact that you're not managing your stress actually affects your microbiome. And so there's this interaction between the gut microbiome, the bacteria, viruses, and components of the gut that are supposed to be there, and the way that the brain is responding, because we know that the gut influences the brain. There's a direct connection there, and vice versa, right? So if we can then go in and kind of fix inflammation and fix the gut and work on proper nutrition and take out inflammatory foods and help manage stress, then what we're going to see is that both of those diagnoses improve, right? There's improvement in the irritable bowel syndrome symptoms, and there's improvement in the anxiety. So I think that, the way that I implement these practices or these lifestyle pillars into my practice is to really first kind of take what our patients and our culture has been taught, by the medical establishment, and say, hold on, there's another way to look at this, right?
Yes.
Let's go further upstream. Let's look at root cause. Let's work on your foundation. Let's make the foundation strong. And then we can really begin to see improvement in symptoms, and then really further understand, is this truly a diagnosis of anxiety, or is this really related to the fact that you have, a blood sugar roller coaster because your
Thank you.
diet is really unhealthy.
Yes, yes. It's amazing. Right. To me, anxiety is part of living, but it, I don't know. Anyway, but semantics. You said Western medicine, and you said integrative medicine and functional medicine. And maybe you can share your thoughts on the differences, because I think people use them interchangeably and aren't quite understanding. So maybe you could talk to that a bit.
Absolutely. So I think Western medicine, or conventional medicine, most people are familiar with. It is disease focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, treatment is oftentimes correlated with disease, and we typically are giving one diagnosis and one treatment, typically a pharmaceutical option. If we're talking about integrative medicine, we're really talking about the understanding that there are multiple modalities that exist within different forms of medicine. So, looking at Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and homeopathy and naturopathic medicine, and taking from those systems as well as conventional medicine, and pulling together, where we might best be able to help people prevent disease, and then bringing in conventional medicine when people are already sick and we need to acutely treat disease. So really that's the integration, that's true integrative medicine. Functional medicine is a little bit different, because to me, it's a subset of the larger integrative medicine piece. And the way that I use functional medicine in my practice is because the origins of it are more biochemistry based, and understanding the body at the cellular level, there is more of a focus at, okay, let's look more in depth at, what the body looks like from a functional standpoint. We can do specific labs and tests, and then we can utilize, supplementation and some of the lifestyle factors to really help improve the body at the cellular level. So it is root cause as well.
Right.
So I do think that, my experience has been that really there's a need for all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I try to, really utilize all three of those systems. And the honest truth is that people like Dr. Andrew Weil have been saying forever that, we really shouldn't be having these divisions. I mean, there is this fellowship in integrative medicine to continue to train physicians further after medical school. But the real focus has actually been to get this into medical school, so that doctors are coming out and they're trained in all of this, and it's just good medicine, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because I'm a bit older than you, but yeah. And especially because my specialty is psychiatry, and I might have oversimplified it, maybe not have been ready for it when it was there as well, but the mind-body interaction and practices, I wish I could bring that to everybody. And because I know that sometimes it takes a while for people to get to that place. You were very fortunate where earlier in your life you were exposed to it and found it helpful, which is wonderful. But, and as I get older, I find myself more open and amenable to it. But it could, it's an amazing impact on your health. So, so if somebody comes into or work with you, because again, I like your perspective, and I think you have a more, I'm gonna say not drilled down, I don't know what the word is, evolution, practice where, because I get a lot of people coming to me and saying, I want to focus on my gut, but they don't really know what that means, or, and just asking, the simple basic lifestyle. So how do you start with people? Yeah.
So what I do to begin is I sort of, we dive a little bit into their, what I call their life timeline. So we kind of go backwards and we identify, what different aspects might be coming up for them. What was their nutrition like growing up? How is it today? How have they managed stress throughout their life? What was their childhood like? Did they have, did they feel safe, and did they have the love that they, felt that they
Mm-hmm.
needed? Did they get that? So first identifying kind of, really an understanding of the patterns throughout their life is where I begin. So my initial visit is really an intake where I'm spending about an hour to an hour and a half, just really understanding that about the patient. And then, we move into, okay, so what does your day look like? How, what are you eating every day? How are you sleeping? How do you move? I don't ask about exercise. Do you go to the gym? I say, how do you move throughout the day?
Mm-hmm.
And are you sweating? Are you detoxing that way? Do you have bowel movements, every day? What are you doing to manage your stress? Do you feel stressed? How do you connect on a spiritual level with people? Do you feel you have community and that you have support? And so we begin to look at those lifestyle components right there in the first visit, the first meeting. And oftentimes, my patients say to me, no one's ever, asked these questions. I've never really thought that. Why are you asking this? And I say, because, health doesn't happen in the doctor's office, right? Health happens in the rest of your life. So you're going to leave here, and I want you to have awareness of the fact that all of these things that you're doing on a daily basis, all these things that I've brought attention to, are what are creating health or disease for you. So from there, we can identify, a starting place. And usually it's right away, wow, we've got to work on your nutrition, because if we can't get your blood sugar under control and we can't get your inflammatory situation under control, you're just not going to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're really stressed out, and we're seeing this, result in insomnia and wakings throughout the night. And again, we know that sleep is one of the most underrated, under talked about, health pillars that exist in medicine. Without proper sleep, where you're cycling through those stages of sleep, you
Mm-hmm.
can't create the hormones that you need. You can't actually begin to synthesize the vitamins and nutrients that your body needs. So again, we really identify where, out
Mm-hmm.
of all of those, pillars, and I talk about them in my book, people are struggling the most. And almost 90% of the time, stress management or resilience, or, whatever you want to call it, is definitely one of the two. And then I would say, nutrition often comes up, um, or sleep as, the second or third. So we begin with those. We'll begin with those.
Those are the big three for sure.
Those are the big three.
Yeah, wow. Um, Stress management and resilience. I'm interested in your perspective on that. Because I get people from the point of, I'm not stressed, everything's fine. And they're like, you can, just by listening about their day, you can tell they're stressed, versus, and resilience, and how you kind of assess that, and what do you look at and think about?
Absolutely. So I think that what you just said about, people saying, I'm not stressed, that happens a lot, right? And I think it's because we've negatively associated stress in our minds. And but the interesting thing, I mean, stress isn't negative. It doesn't have to be negative. We need the stress response to respond to a situation where we're in danger. I mean, if we're driving a car and there's, a car coming at us that we need to get out of the way, we need that stress response. It's what saves our life. If a I don't know, a wild animal or a rabid animal is coming
Right.
towards us, we need to be able to run. And that is the stress response, right? That is that increased heart rate, the increased blood flow, the, movement of blood and energy away from the gut towards the muscles of the legs, and to, to the heart, to increase our ability to oxygenate so we can get out of that situation, right?
Right.
That is the stress response. So what I do first is I break it down. I take it away from this association of this loose, like this, I'm stressed or not stressed, to simply a physiological response.
Mm-hmm.
So, the nervous system can exist in one of two capacities. It's either going to be in the stress response or in the rest and digest, relax response. And that's it. There's no in between. It's not like you hang out, in between these two. So
Right.
either you are, chronically feeling unsafe and stressed and fearful,
Mhm.
and therefore have the resulting physiological response to that, which would be, slightly higher blood pressure, blood sugar that's a little higher, maybe a little bit of an increased heart rate, a gut that's not getting proper blood flow, so digestive issues, maybe constipation, maybe diarrhea, so that's the stress response. Or you are, relaxed and digesting well and absorbing your nutrients well, and your heart rate is low and your blood pressure is normal, and you are feeling creative and focused, and you are feeling that your heart is open and you're feeling connected to the people around you. That's the parasympathetic response, or the rest and digest response. So I think when I start to explain that to them and associate the symptoms, the body, the physical symptoms, then they begin to see, oh, okay, this isn't some loose concept of like, no, I'm not stressed, everything's going well, to like, oh, wait, hold on, I actually have a lot of these symptoms that fall under the stress response. I have these headaches all the time, and, my digestion's really off. And I always get, multiple times a day, I get, stomach cramps and, things like that. So I think that people then, begin to sort of say, well, let's just look at this from a physiological response in the body.
So you
And yeah, so we start by
right.
really,
You take the value of it. It's not good or bad. It just is. And what does that mean? I mean, what does that tell us as information? So, and that's what I always say about emotions. They're not good or bad. They just are. It's, the meaning we associate with them, and, you know, it's not a judgment. And I think so much in Western society is very much about judgment and trying to get people outside of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I tend to draw it out for them on a piece of paper. And at some point I plan to have some cartoon diagram formally done, because I keep drawing this out. But I think that begins to help them understand, and also have an awareness of their body, which I think is really not something most people in America have. We just don't understand that what the body is feeling is intimately connected with our mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mind being our thoughts and our beliefs and the way that we perceive the world and filter things in our experience. So, I think that making that connection, beginning to say, it's just a response that the body's having. So that's it. And once we identify that, then we can say, now here's where these practices come in, right? So if we can begin to teach you breath work, and we know that breath work stimulates the vagus nerve, which directly connects the diaphragm to the amygdala being the part of the brain that we are in when we are in that stress response. That's the part that's activated, and we're having that fearful response and that need to like shrink and protect ourselves, and so if we can stimulate the vagus nerve to get the diaphragm, through diaphragmatic breathing or through breath work, and it goes deep into the recesses of the amygdala, and we say, hey, I'm breathing deep, which must mean I'm okay. It must mean there's nothing scary going on here. So the amygdala can begin to calm down, and not activate. That's just one of the quickest ways I know to get people out of that fear response, is to focus on breath work. And the more that you can begin to practice this when you're not stressed, the more it's going to become habit.
This is the key, because people always want to know what to do when it happens. And I'm like, you practice when it's not happening, so that so you practice when it's not happening, so that you retrain the biology or your physiology. And it's easier to, it's always easier to learn something when you're not stressed. When you're like, oh my God, I'm cramming for the exam. It's, for me, harder to retain information.
100%. And it's always harder to stop a moving train once it's already going downhill, so if you have awareness of the fact that this train's about to take off, because you know what your triggers are, right? Because you've spent some time, being aware of that, then you just start your breath work, or you enter into your meditative state, and you can probably stop that train. The other thing is, we know a lot more about neuroplasticity, which I know when I was in medical school, this was not really a thing. We weren't taught about neuroplasticity. I didn't know that you could rewire your brain to some extent, and so I think that that's because of technology and the ability to really scan the brain and begin to study the brain as an organ from the, internally.
Right.
We've begun to understand that, these practices begin to create new networks that maybe didn't exist before. So instead of you just automatically going down that one pathway, every time you see that friend or your mother-in-law or whoever that really gets your heart rate going and activates that stress response before you can even think about it.
Yes.
Feel your heart rate's up and your blood pressure's up and you're already feeling angry and you're already prejudging the situation, which hasn't even happened. That if you have these practices of breath work or meditation in place, you already know that that's going to be a trigger for you. And so the minute that you just take in those breaths, you take in those breaths, and because you've been practicing, your brain's going to go, I'm not going down that pathway. That's one way to go, but I've been going down this way. I've been going down this way every day for the last 60 days. And I am going to continue to go down this way. And this way is where my body feels calm. And guess what? The most likely outcome is that you're going to have that interaction with that friend, your mother-in-law, whoever, and you're going to be calm, surprisingly. And so probably the interaction is going to go differently than you expected. And so then you begin to have reinforcement. Oh, this could happen differently. Maybe there's another way, And I think that that's the most powerful thing for people to begin to, when they begin to have those experiences, they'll come to me and say, I never knew that I could go into work and not get triggered by my boss, and it was fine. And I'm just happier at work, and I don't come home so angry and upset, and my road rage is going away.
No, absolutely. And that's what I'm curious to your viewpoint on resilience then, because that's what it sounds to me, is that you're building a capacity to not be swayed by, the dreaded mother-in-law or friend. That's, yeah.
By the way, I'm just going to say, because my mother-in-law does really listen into my
I'm sorry. I know it's really bad.
She's wonderful. Yeah. I just bring that up because I have a lot of women that come to my practice, and that tends to be a trigger for them.
And let me just say, it could be that it gets focused on the mother-in-law, but it really is the mother-in-law.
It's not. It's really not. And I think that's the other thing, is when you begin to sit in meditation and these practices, you begin to realize that actually, wow, these triggers are coming from an experience that I had so long ago that it's stuffed so down. I don't even really remember what the experience was, but I do remember the emotions that I had. And those emotions are so imprinted in the body because the emotions result in an exact chemical replication in the body, right? There's a chemical release that happens related to every emotion, whether it's happiness or sadness or trauma or fear or whatever it was. We release a whole host of biochemical reactions and neurotransmitters that create a hormonal response in the body, and that gets imprinted. And then we fall into that so many times. We have that over and over. We don't even remember what that initial incident is. So sometimes then we go looking for things, and we associate the mother-in-law or that boss or that situation with that emotional imprinted experience in the body. And that's not even really what this was about to begin with.
Right. No, exactly. And that's also, I think, the power. I mean, there's so much richness about your past story and how that has affected you and your belief patterns, but there also is a way in of staying in the present and staying in the physiology, and retraining the brain, especially in trauma, because, previous ways of dealing with trauma was having to re-experience some of it. And who wants to really experience trauma? Which, it's counterintuitive, and it's good for certain things a little bit, but in a tolerable level. So, and I lost my train of thought.
Well, and I think that, to your question about resilience, I like to kind of describe it to people as their ability to have a moment of space between a, an environmental situation and their reaction, right? So I feel that when you're practicing these mind body practices frequently, what happens is you almost feel like you're moving in slow motion. Like the thing happens, normally it would trigger you, but you're sort of receiving, you're just not reacting in a way that you normally would. And you just have this half a second of, I don't have to react to that. And that's, so it's almost like creating space so that you don't have to be reactive without you knowing it, right? Without, the unconscious reactivity. And you have a choice. And I think that's what's so empowering is when people realize that, wow, I actually have a choice. I didn't know I had a choice because I've just been reacting all this time. So that's how I kind of describe resilience, that you create that space. There's just more room for the body to kind of, the body's more flexible. The mind is more flexible. You just can kind of things you can give a little more, right? And
Profound. It's profound when people find that in themselves. It really is. Because you're not yelling at your 2-year-old who spilled 9 things in the last 3 seconds. Because the last thing you want to do is yell at the kid, but it comes out.
Absolutely.
And that and you're not a bad person. It's part of being human, but the mindfulness, the practice of meditation helps with the physiology. It's beautiful the way you said that. That gives you the space so you can choose how to respond. And it's just not the truck or whatever going downhill. Yeah, interesting. And what happens so we're talking about interactions and how is that influence health? It sounds kind of a weird question. It might be super obvious, but do we stay in the parasympathetic all the time then to live life, or do we need some sympathetic at time?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and yes, we do need the sympathetic. So the other day, my son had to observe an animal, and he chose a squirrel because we don't have any pets, which he was really upset about because everybody else observed their dog, right? So I'm like, well, let's, we have the squirrels that come in our yard every day, so we're
cute squirrels.
Yeah, not quite a dog, but so. We observed this squirrel, and squirrels just if you look at their body movement, their and body language, they're just relaxed, eating their acorns, and then all of a sudden they hear a branch rustle or something, and they're just at attention, right? Their whole body goes rigid, and their eyes get big, and they're still, and they're trying to decide: is this danger? Is this a threat? Is it not? And then they decide that it's not a danger, and so then they just relax again, right? And they're just eating their acorn. There's no sign of stress in their body language. So I think that if we can get to a point where we can activate our sympathetic response like that, like, oh, I was just triggered because I almost tripped and I had to catch myself, and my body got into this fear response to catch myself, right? But now the situation's over and I'm just going to go about my day. That's an easy one. But if it's something that has a history, like an interaction with a colleague or your boss or whatever, and you have a fight or an argument, what do? We don't walk away from that argument or fight and say, I'm just going to move on with my day. No, we ruminate about it, right? It's, oh, and I should have said this, and then it could have gone that. And we create this entire experience over and over and over again in our mind. And every time we do that, our body experiences the same response, that same
body doesn't know the difference.
Body doesn't know the difference. And so while the sympathetic response is necessary, it's also the thing that we need to retrain ourselves so that we don't sit in it all day long. You know, we don't activate it all day long. And that we can quickly return back to, you know, rest and digest. Let's get back to homeostasis. Let's get back to our body self-healing and doing the things it needs to grow and to thrive. And so, you know, that's really, you know, what this is about. And I think that, you know, we don't experience enough when we get into these patterns. We don't experience enough of the parasympathetic or the rest and digest to even remember what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our baseline is elevated because we're so reactive all the time. And, you know, we've kind of forgotten what it really feels like to not be that way. And people always are, I think, surprised when they go to the beach or, you know, and they have these extended vacations. They're like, I didn't know I could feel so good. You know, that's how we're supposed to be feeling all the time.
Exactly. It is so true. It really, really is. Is there how do you recommend or propose people start with meditation? I know at the beginning you were saying you can't really do it wrong, but what's sort of an easy way that people might begin thinking about it more and trying to practice?
Yeah. So there's a caveat to you can't do it wrong because, you know, anytime you sit down to do the practice, regardless of whether you get into a state of meditation or not, is practice, and practice makes perfect, right? So, or at least maybe I don't love that statement. Maybe practice makes you better, right? So, but let's define meditation. I mean, from a physiological standpoint, you're talking about your brain waves not being in alpha or beta, but in theta or gamma, right? Gamma being a high frequency state, typically associated with ecstasy and, you know, extreme joy. And theta being that deep state of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you know, on a day-to-day kind of basis, we're hanging out sort of, you know, oftentimes between alpha and beta. When we sleep, it's delta. So if we were to define that state of meditation, you know, we would be measuring your brain waves and we would say, you're in theta, you're in meditation right now. You know, oh, but now you're kind of, you know, getting out of it. You're in beta because you're thinking, and then, you drop back into theta. So, and there's ways to measure this. We have, you know, EEGs and QEEGs and things like that that can measure this now. HeartMath is a great tool to utilize. Yeah, absolutely, because we know that the heart rate variability is intimately tied in with what's going on from you know, the electric signal of the brain, right? The brainwave patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use HeartMath. You can use the Muse, which is a little headband that does measure, you know, QEEG and gives you biofeedback to help you train. So for people who like technology, I say use a tool. You know, not only does it give you feedback immediately, but it responds to what your body's actually doing so that you can adjust your behavior. You know, if your focus is on the thoughts, it's going to signal that to you, and then you're going to, bring it back to the breath, bring it back to the breath. So the tool helps using biofeedback. And then there are apps, you know, you can use as well. Headspace, Insight Timer, Calm. These are all apps that have guided meditation at your fingertips, you know, anytime you want. There are so many tools now, right, that we can use. So for people that want tools, want to have it easily accessible to them, you know, that's what I recommend first. I say, you know, just explore some of these, invest in one of them, just pick any of them. And
they're very modest investments.
Yeah, they can range from, you know, $50 a year to, I think like HeartMath is under $100 right now.
So it's not a huge investment, right?
It's not a huge investment. You can get fancy with some of the bigger QEEG things and invest $1,000.
Right.
But for most people, you know, it's adequate. And then for people who really have never done this, I tell them to start with 1 minute. So you could be in your car right before you go into work, or, you know, washing dishes or whatever it is, and just take a minute and see how many times you can bring your focus to your breath, bring your focus to your breath. And when I say that, I ask people to count. So, you know, an inhale would be 1, an exhale would be 2, an inhale would be 3, and an exhale would be 4. And then all of a sudden their mind is on the next thing they have to do. And that's okay. And then when they realize it, oh yeah, yes. Okay, come back to the breath. Start again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you get to 10 before your mind wanders?
Yeah.
Can you get to 30, before your mind wanders? And the other really big key to this is there's no judgment, right? There's no judgment in this. I think one of the things that people do is they're so critical of themselves when they do sit in meditation. They come out of it, they're more angry than when they started. I didn't do this right. My mind wandered so much. How did this happen? 30 minutes have gone by and I was like off in la la land. I fell asleep. And that
You
doesn't
did it.
matter.
Right.
It's okay. You're telling the body, this is the time. This is 30 minutes I'm taking. Hey, we didn't maybe do the best today, but there's always tomorrow and we're going to do it again. I'm going to drag you to this place and we're going to sit or we're going to lay
But
down or whatever we're going to do.
and you work up. You don't.
You can start with a minute. You can start with a minute. I mean, most of the tools are going to say 5 minutes or 10 because, it takes that long. But for somebody who's really a newbie, I would say just start with 1 minute, and start with once a day and then make it a few times a day. And can you then increase your time over the course of the day?
No, exactly. It could be as simple as that. But it's not simple at all. No. There's many ways to look at that. Anyway, Dr. Sethi, thank you so much. What you have to say and share and reinforce and bring to patients, I honestly think is extremely crucial and necessary for people's health and really getting in touch with themselves at the best possible way. So, and it's so underutilized. So I'm glad you're out there teaching doctors this as well, because it really needs to be around more. So thank you. I've really enjoyed our discussion. I think you're offering a free gift, or that's available on your website, because we'll make sure everybody gets the link.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. I have a downloadable guide to mind-body practices to increase energy and optimize your health. So I'll absolutely share that with your audience.
Wonderful.
And Dr. Goldman, it was a pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad that you're able to bring, all of these speakers to your audience, and it was a wonderful conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.